this team wasn't like a playoff team. They just wouldn't have been as an embarrassment as they were.
In terms of how far they dropped, no, they were not going to make the playoffs, even if they were fully healthy.
Sports and culture all in one. Catch the fire, feel the fun. Andrew Sistat, Brad unite. Philly and Y in the spotlight.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 105. We are recapping and mourning the 2025 to 2026 New York Rangers. And Derek Faske from New York's #2 sports show is kind enough to join me. Derek, how you doing?
Good, Andrew. Pleasure as always, and very, very happy that this season is over. Really, this was one of the tougher watches in recent memory. Not that the season before was a whole lot better, but yeah, just the Rangers are definitely in a tough spot right now.
Yeah, a lot of these like season recaps that I do are usually like more like after like a playoff elimination or like down to the wire, like just missed the playoffs. We could have done this in like early January. So yeah. This was a rough season, and I was just telling you before we hit record that I actually checked out middle of January. I just had enough. I couldn't do it anymore. I've had people tell me about, you're missing out on the fun young players that are coming up, and never really sparked any interest in me. But the early season, the struggles at home, I want to get into all of it. It was really, really bad.
Yeah, very. So where you checked out, that's really where I started rooting for them to lose. That's kind of the difference there. Is that I just, kind of watched and hoped, and results there were pretty good for the most part. There were some stretches where they did win games, but yeah, really from the beginning it was a bit disastrous. Now the first 10 to 15 games, the sentiment was, and there's some validity, and I think the metrics probably back this up, is that they did play a decent brand of hockey for the first 15 or so games. They just really couldn't score at all. And in particular, they were, historically terrible at Madison Square Garden. There just simply wasn't enough talent, offensive talent. And that was when at that point, they had Panarin on the team. But even still, and there were some injuries that they dealt with. But that was a big problem. Like the core of this team, there was not enough skill. And things kind of ebbed and flowed, over time. Like the Rangers did score a lot more down the stretch, but they were never really able to overcome those early struggles.
Yeah. So 77 points. That is the lowest point total they've had in a full 82 game season, tied for the worst ever. Is that correct?
I can't say for sure if that is true or not. I'm gonna venture to guess that they've had worse than that. Given for nothing else, before the lockout, you didn't have. You had ties. You didn't have that extra point guaranteed beyond overtime. So I'm sure 77 points is probably on the lower end. But I think
maybe I saw it with the relatively new. It's not that new anymore, but the relatively new system. Yeah, with the overtime losses.
Yeah. It's definitely. Look, post lockout. So in other words, in the last 20 years, this has definitely got to be one of their lower point totals, at the very best, bottom three, right? Because I'm thinking they weren't very good in 2018 and 2019. Those were pretty bad on a percentage basis, right? But technically, I'm sure in the COVID years they played less games. So from a percentage basis, this was definitely by far one of their worst seasons.
And then what was it? What were they? 14, 20, and 7 at home, something like that. So essentially 14 and 27 at home, which is like, I know, the NHL does it differently, but if they count overtime losses separately, and it's obviously to a point, but that's kind of like going, 6 and 11 in the NFL. Like it's just really bad.
It's really bad. Going 6 games below NHL 500 is very bad. because NHL 500 is not good. Like if you were to go 21-21, let's just say, that's an 82-point hit. Like that is not playoff worthy. So you go 14-20-7, and I think that's correct. And a lot of those wins were down the stretch. I mean, it was unbelievably bad. But I also think that's like a cop. In some ways, it's a little bit of a cop out because it's like they just really weren't that good. To me, while the road record was actually, they ended up, I think, above NHL 500. But yeah, they did save their worst play for Madison Square Garden.
No, it's not. It's not like it's a cop out. It's just like an emphatic, like, no, the confirmation, like this is so bad. You got to be. They were that bad at home. Even the way the season started, right? Like they couldn't score. They shut out their first 3 games at home.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, they didn't get their first win at home until I think part of it was because of the schedule, but I think they won home against Nashville. I want to say like mid-November. Like it was crazy how because they went on the road for a while, like, they did not win at home. And they had such a long stretch where they didn't win like a regulation home game for and I know you had the Olympic break. They went from like November 20 something, a win against St. Louis, to finally winning a regulation home game against Toronto in, I want to say, early March.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, it was just crazy.
That's crazy. So, Derek, you talked about the lack of skill. They just didn't have the firepower to score goals. That was a huge problem. What about any other thing that you think other than the lack of skill and ability to score goals, what else went wrong? How do you assess Mike Sullivan in this? What do you think about? Because before I checked out, I thought their defense, the system was actually pretty good. They were playing, they just didn't have the skill. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the system was a lot better like this year than last year. Last year they kind of gave up, and I'm not necessarily saying, Mike Sullivan is exponentially better than Peter Laviolette. I'm not saying that. But yes, like it wasn't as if like Igor and company were under siege, every single game, right? There was a semblance of some defensive structure going on with the Rangers by and large. Now it hit its rough points for sure, especially when Shesterkin and Fox were out of the lineup. It was really bad. Yeah. They were getting bad goaltending. Braden Schneider moves up to play with Gavrikov, and really they dropped off like precipitously defensively. But yeah, they held their own. The Gavrikov-Fox pair was, especially early on before Fox got hurt, was a really good number 1 pair. The team defense was okay, right? The penalty kill was good originally, then it kind of, hit the skids. But yeah. The problem is there, to me still, there isn't many, sure, you could say the defense was maybe better than the scoring, but like when I think of the Rangers, there are still defensive deficiencies as well. Really, the biggest problem when it comes to the defense is the lack of puck moving ability. Other than Fox, I know Gavrikov had 14 goals. There isn't a whole lot of just creativity or being able to get the puck out of the zone easily. They definitely need an improvement there, big time. And as far as getting shots through from the point, that's a big problem for this team as well.
Let's go through some players, some of the core players, and one by one. A lot of this is going to be injury-based. You already have talked about the Fox and Shesterkin injuries that obviously derailed the season. But first off, side note, you agree that even if they were healthy, both those guys were healthy for the full season, this team wasn't like a playoff team. They just wouldn't have been as an embarrassment as they were.
Exactly. Blessing in disguise in a lot of ways. No, they in terms of how far they dropped, no, they were not going to make the playoffs even if they were fully healthy. No. Yeah. They may have. I mean, the problem was in the Eastern Conference, you had some really high point totals. It wasn't going to happen. Maybe if they're in the Western Conference and everyone was healthy, like maybe somehow then they probably would have hung around. But no, this was not going to happen even if they were fully healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, give me your insight. What do you think, Igor? So let's just talk about Igor for a second. Obviously, he had the injury. What do you think about his season?
He was decent. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't terrible. He probably could have been better at certain points, but Shesterkin, I still view him as one of the better goaltenders in the National Hockey League. He's fairly consistent year to year. Obviously, that 2022 season was just otherworldly, and he'll never, he'll just never do that again because of how good it was. But Shesterkin, is, the backbone of the team. And, again, I wish for more in-season, in-season consistency, right? Like the end of numbers, I think end up usually, kind of being in a pretty solid place, but they need him. They need him healthy. And you saw, when they had to go to Jonathan Quick and Spencer Martin, things really, really went off the rails. But for Shesterkin, I thought he was solid.
So what level of that 2022 season do you think he could potentially get to? So that was this is not hyperbolic. That was an all-time great goalie season. So
yeah,
I mean, what do you think? What would next year you be happy with? Like 80% of that, 90% of that? What do you think?
Let me just pull up Shesterkin's numbers. And really, I'm mainly looking at save percentage. Goals against average is very misleading. I'm really going to be looking at save percentage mostly here. And this year it was at .912, which was an improvement over, .905. Really, he had that .935 in 2022, but usually it ends up in the .915 range. Yeah, if we can somehow, now this is a tough ask, but if we can get it to .920, that would be great. That,
Okay.
Because really, other than, and, maybe that first, it was only 12. I can't even really count it. He had .932 in the 12 games and when he first came up. It's, but
Yeah.
Other than that, .916 was his highest, which is very, which is good. But yeah, I mean, for Igor, if we can get, closer to the high 910s, .920, I think that would be great.
Okay. I think, yeah. I mean, he's as we'll talk a little more about like the future of the offseason outlook in a little bit, but I agree that I'm not worried about him going forward. It's just I'm worried, are we going to waste him going forward?
Yes, which is unfortunately possible. I mean, it's interesting with goalies. Goalies, he's 30 years old. I think he still has a lot of prime years left. But yeah, I mean, times are going to be tough the next few years. And so you are going to be inevitably wasting some of Shesterkin's prime. And he's, out of anyone on the team, he's probably the one you can feel with most certainty will be here. And so, like you said, yeah, like it would be a shame, to kind of waste what he provides.
Yeah. Okay. What about Adam Fox? Of course, he had the 2 injuries, right? He came back from the first one, then he had the lower body, upper body. They don't give you any real information, but the second one, okay. Even when he played, right, he was compromised, right? He was clearly not a healthy Adam Fox. A healthy Adam Fox is one of the best defensemen in the league.
Right. Adam Fox's season is very interesting when you consider everything. And to me, and it's tougher to argue with because they won the Olympics, but Adam Fox being stuff for the Olympic team was tough. And I know that he had his struggles in the Four Nations tournament the year before, but it put things in a tough spot as far as his relationship with Chris Drury and Mike Sullivan. I mean, Drury, the assistant GM of the team. Yeah, and Mike Sullivan, the head coach of that team. I know Bill Guerin has the final say, but that bothered me. And I know that Adam Fox is not the perfect player, but he's really good. Even, he was very good, I thought, before he got hurt the first time. He was really good. Then he was only there for a few games that had the lower body injury. And then when he came back, he was rusty. But he ended the season really strong. I mean, there was a stretch there where I think he might have had a 7 or 8 game point streak with like 14 or 15 points. He ends up with 53 points in 55 games and a +5. I think he might have had the highest plus-minus. Like
+5 on a really bad team is actually really good.
On a really bad team, and for a guy that logs as many minutes as he does, and for
against
a guy
top
as
lines.
Well, and let's not forget how many, because you were probably still watching this point, how many empty net goals they allowed. Because that does kind of hurt the plus-minus in a big way. So Adam Fox, he's really, look, he's really good. And maybe Adam Fox isn't to the level that he was a few years ago. I think another long offseason will do him some good and really getting him healthy. And unfortunately, injuries have become kind of a thing the last few years for him, which is something to watch for. But I hope that the relationship can be smoothed over and that he still, as him growing up a Ranger fan, I'm hoping that somehow that helps there. that he wants to be back because he was kind of. I'm not sure if you heard. I mean, he was ominous. He didn't give any guarantees. I mean, that there's a world where Adam Fox isn't back. There is a world. I think he will be, but he is by far, in terms of skaters on this team, he's your best. He's your best skater on the team.
I do want to ask you.
Yeah,
I do want to ask you a little bit more about the Adam Fox offseason aspect. But I'm going to hold on to it for a little bit. I'm tempted to ask you now, but I want to hold it for a little bit for the offseason segment. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I really do want to talk about that. Because I agree. I'm not convinced he's going to be back.
Yeah. I especially with the way he's talking. There is a definite world where Adam Fox has played his last game as a Ranger, or maybe next year will be his last. It just doesn't feel like this is a definite long-term situation, which is really sad. Whatever you trade for Adam Fox is not going to, the return is just not going to be.
Of course not. Another core player, a big bounce back year. Mika Zibanejad, who looked like he was, the decline the year before, last year was pretty obvious and blatant. A pretty good season, right from Mika. Were you surprised? What do you think?
Yeah, Zibanejad, he was probably their most in terms of significant pieces. He was probably the most consistent player from game one. And the effort was there. There was a little bit more of an explosiveness to him. He was so bad for the first 3 quarters of the prior season. It looked like, all right, I was thinking, this is going to be one of the worst. This is going to be one of the most problematic contracts on the board here. And now now he's not nowhere near, one of the biggest problems as far as contracts go moving forward. Yeah, 34 goals, 44 assists, 78 points. A lot of that damage on the power play, for sure. But a lot of it, a lot of good work as well down the stretch with Alexi Lafreniere and Gabe Perreault. Yes, Mika Zibanejad in a really bad Rangers season was one of the bright spots.
I agree. And amazing the difference in a year. A year ago, it just felt like, how do we get off this contract?
Yeah. And see, that's how crazy, how things can change in a year, right? So you're hoping in other cases that can be the case, so to speak. But I think with Zibanejad, at least you go into next season hoping that he can give you, some semblance of what we just saw.
Yeah. The other guy, JT Miller, dude, Derek, I got to tell you, I'm not a fan of JT Miller. I don't really like his game. I don't really agree that they should have brought him in, made the trade for a big contract. I don't like that they made him captain, given his history, all the locker room issues he had previously. It seems like you're in agreement with me based on your nodding. What's your take on JT Miller, all of that, and what do you think about his season? Because obviously, after the Olympics, he was better, right?
Yeah.
But what's your take on JT Miller's season?
Yeah, JT Miller was probably my, as far as just on the whole, the player I was just most frustrated with and just couldn't tolerate this season. For everything you just said, bringing him in, making the trade for him, it's not what you gave up. I know you didn't give up. Look, in reality, I feel bad for Philip Hedl and, Victor Mancini and look, the first round pick, that is significant. But you didn't give up a crazy amount. But it's bringing him in and taking on his contract and everything that comes with it. That may go down as one of, and Chris Drury's made a lot of mistakes. That could that could be the worst one. Unless he really, we talk about Zibanejad, he needs to turn around next year. And it's the style of player that JT Miller is, I don't know. I think this is the beginning of a decline. Now, he could maybe have a small bounce back next year, but the Vancouver Canuck JT Miller, that is long gone, unfortunately. And naming him captain, I would love if they would strip the captaincy from him. I don't think they will.
That probably has a weird impact on the clubhouse, on the locker room, just having your cap. I don't know, but yeah, it's very strange that you wouldn't have given it to one of the players that's been here and been part of the core for a long time, like a Zibanejad or a Fox,
right? And look, the reality is that they didn't really have that many great candidates. And for me, I would have been totally fine with them not having a captain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the candidate. No, you don't need a captain. What is
You
this?
don't need one. I think we can look at the Boston Bruins as a current example. I don't believe they have a captain right now, and they had a great season. And apologies if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure they don't. Pasternak and McAvoy would have been certain candidates, but they are not.
Yeah.
And the Rangers have had, in the little pockets of time where they didn't have a captain, the Rangers had some of their greatest success. So yeah, because look, the Zibanejad, he really isn't necessarily captain material. I think there was a lot of talk about Vincent Trocheck, but Vincent Trocheck, I would have rather had none than Trocheck. No offense to him. Adam Fox is not really a captain guy.
Yeah, he's not that kind of leader, vocal leader. No,
he's not. So they tried to force it to JT Miller, who had off-ice issues with the Canucks. He was a Ranger previously. I don't know. That is a situation that I am very concerned about when it comes to JT Miller. And there's, like Zibanejad, I believe 4 more years on the deal. So, good luck.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So I had some other Ranger fans telling me about how fun the bright young players were late in the season. The one I heard from the most is really from my dad, who is this ultra positive fan. It's kind of funny. Just on a side note, just this whole because he's a Yankees fan also. It confirms that Yankee fans are spoiled. For the Yankees, I'll he'll answer the phone. I'll talk to him or whatever. Call me. He's like, well, this bullpen's horrible. Whatever. And they're the Yankees. They're always good. And then with the Rangers, it'd be like, oh well, they're so fun to watch. They have Gabe Perreault. I mean, I love watching this team, and it's like, well, what's bad about them? Nothing right now. And so it's just funny. But anyway, he kept talking up all these young players. Other than Gabe Perreault, what do you see? Is there anything that makes you feel optimistic from what you saw? Anyone that you're like, this guy could be a piece. Here's a piece. What do you think?
I mean, I think Gabe Perreault is the one that is the most intriguing, obviously, right? I mean, he's one that is worth kind of assessing, and I feel a lot better about him than I did going into the season. He's still very young, and so that is a real reason he is someone that I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but this can be a solid, good top 6 contributor.
Top 6, yep. Yeah.
And they need that.
That's great.
And they need that badly, right? So I would have loved for him to have gotten first power play unit time, but they decided that he was on there. And then once JT Miller came back from one of his myriad of injuries, they decided to take a pro off there. And so I don't love that. I would rather him be on the number 1 unit, but that's here nor there. There's some other, more bottom 6 depth sort of guys that maybe could be something. An interesting player, if we want to categorize him in the younger department, and he still kind of is, Ty Cartier was a really nice waiver claim from the Seattle Kraken. And I believe Cartier is still 25 years old. That is someone that I can say fairly confidently will be in the bottom 6. He will, there's no doubt. Actually, he's 24. He's turning 25 in a week. So, okay. He really played well. He's got a high motor. That's someone, we saw Noah Laba make the team. Is he a 3rd-line center? Is he a 4th-line center? Not sure. He'll be in the bottom 6. But he's someone that, all in all had a pretty solid season, depending on what your expectations were. And then the only other guys that come to mind, as far as younger players that really kind of made a little bit of a mark was Yaroslav Hamelash and then Adam Sikora.
Yeah.
But if you told me that they didn't make the team next year, I wouldn't be shocked either, because both of them are, they don't have to go through waivers to be sent down. So think about this for just a moment here. Let's say it came down to a Matt Rempe. Let's just throw him out there. And he's kind of, there's always a lot of talk around him, but I'm just using him as an example. I believe next year he would be subject to waivers. So what they might do, because a lot of teams do this to kind of, keep as many options as possible. Unfortunately, a guy like Sikora or Hamelash could be the odd man out to start the season, because of the fact they have that option of being sent down, whereas like a Rempe or an Edstrom don't have that ability. You could lose them. So I'd like to think that if Hamelash and/or Sikora earn their role in training camp, that they'll make the team, right? I would like to believe that, but I don't know that for 100% certain. So
I see. Yep.
Right. And then the other guy that comes to mind, Dylan Garand. I would say he's the front runner for backup goalie right now. Now, they may bring in a veteran option, but Garand, in the 3 games he played, looked pretty good. And so he could be a guy that we see next year for sure as the backup.
He played at the very end of the season, right? Because I didn't see any of his starts.
Yeah, he played the 3 games. And one of them was the very last game of the season versus Tampa. So
Where they won.
Where they won.
To hurt their draft lottery chance.
But then Calgary won the day after, so it ended up being no harm, no foul. So
that's good.
So they ended up going from 3 to 4 to back to 3. So pre-lottery. But yeah, so there are some younger players, but at the same time, it's, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's not an overabundance of unless we want to include Alexis Lafreniere in that category. Obviously, he's going to be coming on the 7th season, but he's still around those guys' age, and you're going to need him. We always talk about how he's an important piece.
I was actually going to ask about Lafreniere and Cooley next.
Right.
The 2 players that are kind of in between the core player and young player.
Right.
They're kind of I don't even know, but they're somewhere in between those.
Yes.
Those 2. What do you think? Lafreniere was better down the stretch, right?
Yeah. So I'll say Cooley first. I didn't love Cooley's season as compared to the year before. I look at Will Cooley. To me, he's a 3rd-line player. I don't think that he's a top 6 player. And that's look, Will Cooley is one of the more easily successful Ranger draft picks in recent memory, right? Will Cooley, he is a legitimate NHL player. He's put up 20 goals in back-to-back seasons, but I think there was a lot left to be desired this past season. He kind of turned it back on a little bit towards the end. He had a real rough stretch. He might have been injured as well when listening to things, but this year made it clear to me that Will Cooley ideally is on your 3rd line. Alexis Lafreniere, that first half was so bad, but specifically after Panarin was out, as far as him being sat out and then traded, Lafreniere did really pick up the pace quite a bit. And what helps is he got consistent power play 1 time too. So he ends up putting up respectable numbers. He is, for this team to have any modicum of success, he needs. I'm not saying he'll never be a number 1. Look, he's never going to be that guy, unfortunately. He's never going to be a number 1 overall pick type guy, but you need him to be a good top 6 player. And I'm hoping that, without having to defer to Panarin now, then he can kind of, look, he's one of the longest tenured Rangers on the team now. That's just, which is crazy to think of.
Yeah.
I think he's probably around number 4 after Zibanejad, Fox, and Shesterkin. But, Lafreniere, I would love for him to be good. I really, really would. I'd kind of lost faith in him, but the guy, he does have talent, right? It's not as if he lacks skill. It's just there's not a whole lot of consistency, and hopefully maybe this Lafreniere Zibanejad Perreault line can be a thing. But to me, that is more of a 2nd line, not a 1st line.
Yeah. Oh, that's definitely not a 1st line. Not in a contending team.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk off season. I have a couple things I want to ask you, dude, and I have. What should we start with? Do you want to start with specific players, which I think there's 2, and I think the 2 I'm going to ask you about?
Yeah.
Or do you want to start with the bigger picture, which is my biggest concern about the team?
Let's start the players and then big picture.
Okay. And it might cross over into it on its own anyway, naturally. Yeah. So the 2 players, obviously, we already mentioned him. One of them, Adam Fox. So Adam Fox and Vincent Trocheck are the 2 that I think that we're gonna hear a lot of noise about this offseason. Which one do you want to start with, and then what do you think the likelihood is, and what do you think the Rangers are going to be looking for in the return? Because I saw the rumors about Trocheck where they were looking for like a top 6 player, but whatever. Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean Trocheck. I would have liked if it could have happened. I would have liked to have traded Trocheck at the deadline. Like, not to say that you can't get a good return in the offseason, but and it's nothing against Vincent Trocheck necessarily. It's just in the evolution of where this team is. I think that you need Vincent Trocheck. He's not getting any younger. Like I think the time is now to trade him. He has, what is it? 3. I think with him, it's 3 more years on his deal. And so yeah, with Vincent Trocheck, there's a good chance that he's traded. I mean, look, with how it's not a guarantee. I'm still not totally sure what they're going to do, but we certainly can't be shocked at all if he is traded. And I think, look, you do want to get. You don't want to trade him for, you don't want to sell it short. But I think if you can somehow get, a sort of a ready-made young player, that would be great. And maybe you do that in desperate teams, right? Like the Detroit Red Wings, come to mind as a team. Like with what they've done, you'd think that Steve Yzerman, for better or worse, would want to take a swing. And maybe Vincent Trocheck's that player. We'll see what the Minnesota Wild do in the playoffs. If they fall short, maybe that's a team that might want to try to acquire Trocheck. But I think that if I had to make a guess, with how much smoke there was, he's probably, I would guess that he's going to be traded in the offseason.
You're right, by the way. 3 years, $5.6 million for Trocheck. Which
look, and the good thing, and why the return should be deep, that's a very reasonable cap hit. If a team likes Vincent Trocheck, they're probably going to pony up and trade the Rangers, a combination of prospects and picks. And I think the Rangers are hoping for someone that's like ready-made, and that might be a little bit tougher.
It's harder to find. Yeah, because I think the kind of team that would be attracted to Trocheck is the kind of team that's a contending team that he'd be like their 4th or 5th best forward.
Exactly.
Like any team that's going to give up, they're not going to give up the win now player that the Rangers are looking for potentially, which is I want to talk a little bit about. So I guess we'll see, but I agree. He doesn't make sense for where they are right now with their roster. He doesn't work.
He doesn't. And if not for nothing, you can still make a semblance of it. Like you have a little bit of a luxury where, and look, we'll see where JT Miller is, center or wing, but you do have some, I'm not saying it's great center options, but you could trade Vincent Trocheck and it's not like, wow, like they are just exponentially worse. You know what I mean? Like they're still not going to be great. And you're going to, miss, in terms of his face-off ability and his kind of all situations, but you can, whereas if you trade Adam Fox, like forget about it. Like that cannot be replaced.
Let's get to that now.
Yeah.
How would your reaction be? What would your reaction be if they traded Adam Fox this offseason?
I'd be very upset.
Does it depend on the return?
Sure. If you're getting some, grand, unbelievable return, then of course, I could not be so upset. But if Fox is dealt, I'd like to believe it's because the player wants out. I don't think the Rangers, despite the Olympic snub and all that, I don't think the Rangers have much of a desire. I think they want him here. They'd be crazy. I think they'd be crazy not to. It's if Fox wants to go elsewhere, and then at that point, from a leverage perspective, you're not in a great place.
Do you think that he would want to go elsewhere because he's actually there's a fractured relationship there with Sullivan, with upper management, or do you think it's because he wants to win and he sees the Rangers aren't, or maybe both?
I think a little bit of both. I do. I think it's because he's unsure with the direction of the team, and I'm sure he's only human. I'm sure he's not happy about the way that things were handled.
And everything else. Like everything else with Trouba, this is the way they handled Trouba. They traded there's a lot of issues there with that core roster that the Chris Drury-led front office has really, really, other than dismantling a good team and making several bad decisions, he's also been very bad with the culture. The players, he's just done a really bad job at all facets of running an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that is going to be a big, big name to kind of, see. And Fox isn't alone. You hear his defensive partner, Vlad Gavrikov, who they just signed, one of his best friends is Artemi Panarin. And I'm not saying look, I think that trading Panarin, it's unfortunate what the return was, extremely unfortunate, but I think
that's what happens when you give, right, the no trade.
Exactly. And so I think that moving from Panarin was the right thing to do. You really had no choice. With that said, Vlad Gavrikov, that's a guy that I'm curious as to who wants to be here and who doesn't want to be here. That's going to be kind of a big piece to this offseason.
All right, big picture now. This is my big concern. It sounds to me the way Dolan talks about Drury, the way that Drury is not even on thin ice. He's going nowhere. And based on what Drury, based on what I read, is that Drury's going to try to be aggressive and think that he can, they have a lot of cap space. He's going to build this team up to win next year, which I think would be incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
They need to rebuild this.
Yeah, no, I would like to believe that's not the case. And it's a double-edged sword here. I think Dolan does trust Drury, and with that comes the ability for Drury to kind of slow play, long game this thing, which is the right way to go, but it allows Drury to be here for longer than he deserves to be. So
which is already passed.
Right. So there's no real total win-win here. But given the situation and given that Drury's probably not going to be let go, I'm with you. I think Drury deserves to have already been let go. But knowing that he's going to be here, I think they got to be patient with this thing. I think you have to. I
agree.
You have to do your draft picks. It would be silly to me to go after there isn't many free agents out there, but to go after an Alex Tuck.
You could use the cap space and take on big contracts via trade.
Yes.
And that's a wrong decision.
Right. I think that use the cap space as a weapon as far as bringing on, getting assets, right? Like getting draft capital.
I agree.
Think about the Patrick Nemeth trade, which is, sort of long forgotten about in some ways. That's still effective in this day, where they traded multiple second-round picks to the then Coyotes. Try to do things like that. Take on bad contracts and get, assets. Use the cap space in the right way. Don't do it, just to sign guys, that, aren't going to really help you get to where you need to go. The Rangers, here's the sad reality. They need to be bad for the next couple of years. Now, I'm not going to root against them from the start of the year. I'm not going to go there.
Of course not, no.
But the best thing that can happen is that come the end of next year is another top 5 pick. And you need to hit on them, which we don't really have a whole lot of faith that they will. But that is the way. That's the way back, and it's not fun. And you hope that a culture is somehow built within that, right? That somehow, despite losing, that they can build some sort of, not a country club attitude and more of a hardworking group, and can work their way. But it's not going to come quick. I think that this team is not going to be all that competitive the next few years, but you cannot rush this thing.
I agree that, and you think that's the mindset fans should have. This is gonna be a couple of bad years.
Yeah, I think
let's be okay with it.
I think
you have to accept it.
I think you have to temper expectations, and if you're the front office, you have to have that mindset. This whole it's not a retool, it's not a rebuild, it's a retool, which maybe it's all semantics, but no, embrace the rebuild. Seriously, don't have this be a quick fix. Do it the right way, and it gives you the best chance possible to have some sustained success, maybe 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, a rebuild in the NHL doesn't have to take long.
No. Look, you're going to miss, in all likelihood, you're probably going to miss the playoffs for a couple of years. And look, and the crazy thing is this, not that I think that we'll make it next year, but there are a few teams this year that had no, look at the Penguins, for example. They went from Mike Sullivan to Dan Muse, who is one of the Rangers' assistant coaches the last 2 years under Peter Laviolette. And, as we're recording this, obviously they're not exactly doing well in their playoff series, but they had a very good season. The point is that you don't have to, be in total buy mode. I mean, the Boston Bruins, they traded away Brad Marchand last year, and then, they weren't supposed to do anything, and they, new head coach, and they're doing a nice job. So, some rebuilds take longer than others, but I think that they should not be trying to okay, we're going to, get, I don't, the problem is there's not even really great guys out there.
There are potential. This was like a potential Connor McDavid free agent class, and then all these guys signed extensions.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's right. And knowing that, if McDavid shakes loose in a few years, just look, try to go about it the right way. And if you can somehow get involved in that a couple years from now, great. That would be awesome. But put yourself in that position where you're an attractive destination to go to. Obviously, look, as bad as Rangers can be, they still tend to attract good players. Despite some of the jury stuff and this and that, I think he's trying to clean up some of the things we talked about. I think he's, maybe overly so, honestly, this year, where it felt like he's really, almost as a detriment, trying to kind of smooth some things over, trading Carson Soucy. It was almost a favor. I mean, not that Carson Soucy's very good, but I think that they just had a baby, and so he traded Soucy to the Islanders so he could be close by. Little things like that. It seems like he's trying to be a little bit more aware of not trying to rub players the wrong way. But yeah, Andrew, I really think that if we're being honest with ourselves, they're not going to be very good next year. I don't see the pathway there.
I agree, and it's unfortunate, but it's better than trying to do these quick fixes. I agree. Derek, any last thoughts before you talk about your show and plug everything where everyone can find you and everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that with the Rangers, we got to be patient here. It's gonna be interesting. As far as Mike Sullivan goes, I think while Sullivan isn't really in the crosshairs yet, as far as fans, and look, it's more of a jury issue. But I don't know, as far as Mike Sullivan goes, when they do sort of get back into contention, if he's still here, I do have some concerns about Mike Sullivan. Look, he's a good, I like the things he has to say. There's the defensive structure got a little bit better, but I don't know. Sullivan, I have my concerns with him, but he is at this point, sadly, very low on the list of concerns. But
yeah, assess him with a real talent on the roster, right?
Right, exactly. So he gets a pass this year, but I look at Pittsburgh, and now I know at a certain point, just coaches, there's a shelf life there, and so that's part of it. And obviously, he had early success with Pittsburgh, but I do find it interesting where all of a sudden Pittsburgh goes from Sullivan to Muse, and look what they've done. Not exactly a great look for Mike Sullivan, but again, there's many reasons for that. You could do worse than him, and he isn't the biggest problem. But yeah, some of the decisions that were made this year and some of the philosophies leave a bit to be desired. But again, we'll kind of touch that more when it's relevant. But yeah, I mean, I just want the Rangers to be good again and really and legitimately good. Not a flash in the pan. I want them to be a consistent, dangerous threat, and we need them to do well in the draft. That is so important.
For sure. You want to plug New York's #2 sports show?
Yeah, New York's #2 sports show. We're on YouTube. We've been growing. Our Ranger community really has been, I would say, the most consistent. And it was tough, this year. Look, with the team being worse, when it first happens, I think initially there's a lot of communication, a lot of comments and things like that. But then after that, it kind of drops off. So, with more Ranger success, I think comes, a little bit more involvement but really appreciative of kind of the Ranger fan base and embracing the channel. And, we're going to have a lot to discuss. This is a big off season with probably a decent amount of turnover, as we've discussed. Right now we're talking about the Yankees, and they got a series upcoming with as we're recording this, with the Boston Red Sox. And, Yankees early starts, it's okay. They're 13-9 or so, I think 13-9. So, Hopefully they can somehow get over the hump this year. Well, I'm sure we'll discuss that at some point. But and then we got the New York, the NFL draft coming up, and New York Giants having the number 5 and number 10. So I'm going to be excited to discuss what comes of that. So we're just it's never stopping. Year-round conversation about those teams.
Everyone, Derek does a great job. Love the Rangers content, and kudos to you for sticking with it throughout the whole season. I couldn't watch the team, and there you were recording after every game. So, Good job. That's impressive in itself.
There's something wrong with that, probably, but just I had to stick with it.
The link to Derek's channel will be in the description. So check him out, subscribe, and also subscribe here. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Sports and culture all in one. Catch the fire, feel the fun. And juices that glad unite. Philly and